This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Coveil. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. One of those fun stories today that I have the good fortune to be a part of, because I never know who I'm going to talk to exactly on this show. Today, it's the CEO of the Philadelphia 76ers professional basketball team and the New Jersey Devils professional hockey team. My guest is Scott O'Neill, and we are talking about his new book, Be Where Your Feet Are: 7 Principles to Keep You Present, Grounded, and Thriving. It's got to be fun to have a gig where you get to be around so many fantastic athletes to watch up close and personal. I mean, Scott gets to watch, as often as he wants, up close and personal, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons. These are 2 of the best basketball players that have ever lived. That's no hyperbole. Top 100, I'm sure. So that's just really fun. But how do you get to be in the position to be the CEO of the Philadelphia 76ers? You just know there's got to be a good story there. And there is. One of hard work, one of serendipity, one of a little luck, and one of being very persistent and dogged and not quitting. Because isn't that the whole key? Don't quit. Persevere. Don't stop. Keep your eye on the goal. Keep pushing. So many people don't do that. So if you do that, hell, you've already got a leg up. Without any further delay, let's jump right in and get a bunch of these great life lessons from Scott O'Neill. I want to know what professional teams you are currently CEO of, because I start to go through your bio and I'm like, there's a lot going on here. Lay it out for me as the starting out of the gate.
When I got here 8 years ago, I was the CEO of the Philadelphia 76ers of the NBA. And then very quickly, we bought the New Jersey Devils of the National Hockey League, and then got into esports. Dignitas is the name of the team. And then we started building other platforms around it. We have an investment platform, a really cool innovation lab where we jump into early stage companies, often case pre-business plan. And then we have a venture fund that's a hair later stage. We have a real estate company. We do a lot of different things. It's an incredibly fun company called Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. We've grown the value about 5 times in the last 8 years, and hoping the next 8 look just like the last 8. We've got many, many more opportunities to grow.
Are you currently with the Eagles also? Is that part of your prior work?
No, that's my history. Grew up in New York, went to Villanova undergrad, which is right outside of Philadelphia. Graduated from Villanova, went and was an incredible bouncer at an awful bar at the Jersey Shore called the Princeton. Got a job as an assistant for the New Jersey Nets. They're now the Brooklyn Nets, but way back, 1992. Then worked for the Philadelphia Eagles. And then my journey took me throughout sports. I went to Harvard Business School and came back, failed in a startup called Hoops TV, which was a crash and burn. A few lessons learned there. Then went to work at the NBA, which was talk about trend following. So we built what David Stern, the former commissioner, was asking for, build me the McKinsey sports leagues. We went and found things that were working in teams, build best practices, and made sure other teams were following them. So it was our version of trend following. And then went to go be president of Madison Square Garden, where I oversaw the Knicks and New York Rangers, college basketball, tennis, boxing, all that kind of stuff, which was incredible. What a platform in New York at the world's most famous arena.
I'm jealous at how much sports you've had a chance to see up close and personal. Oh my God.
Yeah, no, I've seen way, way, way too many games. I think it's the greatest business in the world to be a part of.
Let me keep you at that early stage, so to speak. As I hear you talk, you say, okay, I was a bouncer at one bar and you kind of moved up these stages. You took a job as an assistant. You sound like a guy who was grinding versus a guy who was handed the silver spoon, so to speak.
Yeah, you could certainly say that. My folks had children really young, and I was a food stamp baby as a kid and saw my parents struggle mightily growing up. I was big on puffed rice and powdered milk. And if you grew up in the U.S. in the 70s, you know what that is. If you didn't, you won't. lots of mac and cheese and for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then my folks made it, which was pretty cool. So I went from food stamp to country club and then back again as they lost it all. So fascinating way to grow up. I think a great education. I was not handed much growing up. Definitely a little bit of grit to my game and scrappiness. I have a humongous chip on my shoulder that I'm trying to wear down over the years, but it still rears its ugly head at times. I was working for $15,000 as an assistant with no benefits, no overtime, and no vacation. So that's the way to do it. Living in a little 3-bedroom with 7 guys, it's the way to do it.
The first job was the Nets at 15,000?
Yeah.
Sometimes people might hear, oh, an assistant with a professional basketball team at a low salary. Even that could be very competitive to get. I mean, there's only so many slots behind the door, so to speak. How in the world did you make that first pivot? Take me back in time. I want to know how the hell you got that job. What did you do? What were you moving? What was the thinking? What was going on?
I was living at the shore with a bunch of my friends, playing basketball twice a day, working out in the morning, sitting at the beach, having fun. And my friends all had pretty good things lined up. One was going to med school, one was going to get his PhD, another one was with Arthur Andersen, another one was Ernst & Young. They were well on their way. I was the one outlier. I hadn't even interviewed for a job. My mom called, and she and my dad were leadership development trainers at that point in my life. And so they had some big clients at that time. So ADP was one of them, which is a payroll processing company. Sounds really exciting, I know.
I had the founder of Paychex on this show, so he's made a couple $1 billion. So it's pretty exciting to make a couple $1 billion. So.
And ADP had this string of consecutive double-digit quarterly growth they had for years and years and years. So a wonderful company, and my folks had quite a run there. But nonetheless, so my mom called, and she's this wonderful, wonderful woman, probably 5'2", Italian, really passionate. And she said, Scott, I set up an interview for you at ADP. And I'm thinking, oh no. I get in my car, I head back towards Villanova, and I was going to stay at a friend's house who was doing a 5th year there. And my car broke down. I had this old Saab, an awesome car called the Red Baron, I called it. Anyway, so I get out of my car, I hitchhike back. It's probably 2 a.m. at this point. My friend's a bigger guy, so I forgot my clothes in the car. So I show up at this interview effectively in a clown suit. I'm a 42. He was probably a 48. My shoes are a 10.5. He was probably a 13. No belt, tie, shirt looked ridiculous. And he had a Suzuki Samurai, which I don't know if you remember those cars, but it was a tiny little Jeep, no sides, no roof. So I show up, my hair looks like Don King. I'm showing up thinking like I am the man. What an effort to get here. I hitchhiked 100 miles. The guy I interviewed with, who I stayed in touch with for years and years and years until he passed away about 8 years ago, named Paul Bugley, who was running the office, looked at me and said, son, you don't want this job, do you? I said, no, I do. He's like, no, seriously, like anyone that would work for me would have figured out a way to get to Nordstrom and gotten clothes that fit. You seem like a really interesting young man. Call me when you get serious. That was the first dose of reality I'd ever had in my life. Terrified to get my mom on the phone. And back then it was a little less common. So I ducked her for 2 or 3 days until I felt the wrath. And after that, it wasn't the same at the shore. I was like, I lasted another 10 days and I just went home. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get serious. So that was my first dose of you think you know everything, but you actually know nothing, kid. And I went home. My folks worked out at our house. My parents had moved to Connecticut when I was in college. I didn't know anyone there. So it wasn't like going home for a big party. It was going home to live with your parents. It was very humbling. First day I came down, my dad said, what's the plan? I said, I have no idea. He said, all right, go upstairs, write down 20 places you want to work. So I go upstairs, write down my 20 places. I said, now what do I do? He's like, you need to find someone that knows somebody at one of these companies. So that's what I did. And again, this is like pre-internet. There's no email at this time. I'm writing letters. You can't even think about how crazy it was back then. I got a contact name at each of these 20 places. I didn't have much more than that. At the Nets, one of my friends at Villanova's parents were a season ticket holder. That's as close as I could get. So I used their name and I sent my resume in and I got a reply, hey, come interview. And that's how I was hired. It's kind of bizarre, actually.
I keep you at that early stage, and then let me jump you up in the essence of time since I only have so much of your time. Let me jump you up to being hired as CEO of the Sixers. Now, I don't watch too much sports, but I can't help but not hear about the Sixers in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, you guys have been in the news for losing, for winning, and for all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff. Fair assessment?
Oh, yeah, we are a lightning rod for news. The good, the bad, and the ugly. We've done it the right way, I think. I was fired from Madison Square Garden at the right time. I had a wonderful run there and loved the people there and loved the brand. I had to sit out a year, as you often do in those kind of situations. And I was 10 months in, and Josh Harris and David Blitzer called, and they owned the Sixers. They just owned it for a couple of years and had made a couple early owner type errors. The team was wallowing. So we were practicing at effectively like something that looked like my junior high school. They had just made what's arguably the worst trade in NBA history, and their business was being run like a small market team. So they called and they said, "Do you want to do this? Is this going to be enough? Are you interested?" And we only met a dozen times or so. And I kept saying, like, I like these guys. Like, they want to grow. We have similar values. We have similar appetite for growth. Let's go do it. So on my first day, we traded our best player, who was an all-star, for the number 6 pick overall, who never panned out. And then we took I was still in the league, but not an all-star by any means. And then we took Michael Carter-Williams, who ended up being rookie of the year at 11. And then we traded him a few months later. This was a hardcore rebuild, which got dubbed Trust the Process by one of our players, which really picked up steam.
Hold on, before you jump ahead, I want to unpack a lot of this. And we're going to use some examples throughout your book because I think it kind of applies to this. And this is a great story, the little bit that I know. When was Sam Hinkie hired?
Sam and I were hired about a month apart.
Okay. So you guys are kind of coming in together, right?
Yeah. And then Brett Brown, who was to be the coach for 7 years, was 3 months after that. We all came in as we were the team.
We could talk for hours about what happened and whatnot, but it's such a fascinating process and you can shorten it. But essentially, if I'm going to say this right, Sam looked at the NBA world and said, my gosh, if we can get a superstar or two, this is the way to win in the NBA. And I think anybody that knows anything about the NBA knows that to be true, starting back with Bird, Magic, etc., Michael Jordan, etc. Then you came up with a player dubbed it this, where it started to become known as the process. But this process involved a lot of losing. Why don't I let you explain this?
You wrote a blog post recently on patience and how hard it is to be patient. And we have a hardcore belief that patience is the last great arbitrage in sports. You have effectively 30 billionaires who have almost unlimited resources, all trying to do the same thing, which is win. And you have a cap system that regulates what you can do somewhat. Patience, we thought, was the great arbitrage. Sam Hinkie had a couple great comments. He used to say, if you want to go to the moon, don't bring a ladder, which I think sums it up pretty good. Trust the process became a very electric phrase where there were a lot of people frustrated with what we were doing and how we were doing it, including the media, including our neighbors, including my kids' teachers. Losing isn't fun. We went through a lot of players. The whole idea was to accumulate draft picks and take some shots on some high volatility players. At one point, we won 10 games over the course of an 82-game season. I think we lost 26 games in a row at one point. So it was not inspiring or fun at the time, but we had this incredible conviction that what we were doing was worthwhile. We were willing to take the pain, and there was a lot of it.
I think we have to agree, though, that in hindsight, it worked. Whether or not at this moment in time you win the NBA championship this year or get close or win it next year or don't win it, I think you've had enough success to say that it did work. Is that fair?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define success. For me, to go from worst to first.
Well, wins.
Yeah, no, wins is one. And then we went from the lowest season ticket base in the league to the highest season ticket base in the league. We became certainly a powerhouse brand and resuscitated a brand that had been dormant for several years. So, yeah, I think it's a success. We all want to win a championship. That's what we're building towards and for, and hope we get there for sure. But in terms of, can this be replicated? Because a lot of people want to know, can you do this? I don't think I could. It took a toll. It took a toll on us, our psyche. There are people whose careers were made and there are people whose careers were broken. It was hard to do what we did, and it took a long time. This has been 8 years. While we've been good the last 3 or 4, for sure, the first 3 or 4 were pretty tough.
Let's take the title of your book, for example, Be Where Your Feet Are. So you start this process. There's a lot of losing, not directly on purpose, but the whole plan, there ended up being a lot of losing. That affords you the opportunity to get the first pick in the draft several times, I believe. Speak to drafting Joel Embiid, because this is really fascinating. You get the opportunity to draft this guy who everyone knows is going to be a star, but then out of the gate, you lose him the first 2 years. You had to have been thinking in the back of your mind, oh my gosh, Greg Oden. Oh my gosh, Bill Walton. There had to have been in the back of your mind, oh no, we did this whole long years process and now, oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's some degree of luck that comes with anything that's successful. And there can be good luck and bad luck. In Joel's case, he had fractured his back the previous season, his only season in college at Kansas. but he was considered a transformational, transcendent talent and slipped. Andrew Wiggins went first and Jabari Parker went second. So we had the third pick that year. He arguably fell to us, but was hurt.
He only fell to you because he was hurt, though, probably?
Yes. And then you look at those two players now, they're still in the league, Andrew Wiggins and Jabari Parker, but Joel Embiid is
MVP quality.
MVP caliber player. And he does things at 7 foot plus, 280 pounds that I've never seen done ever before. And maybe will never be done again. I mean, he is ridiculously gifted, skilled, and competitive. Yeah, he was hurt for a couple of years. Ben Simmons was the number 1 overall pick. He was hurt for a year. I mean, we had some things happen that were not great.
How did you ground yourself with those two great players with both feet injuries, I think, and those kinds of injuries? How did you guys stay grounded in, well, I mean, you personally, because you have to be thinking, my gosh, if these guys don't come around, maybe I won't be here. I mean, it had to have been terribly frustrating.
I was feeling the weight of it all. I consume media, so I was reading what people were saying locally, nationally, internationally. I was feeling the pressure quite a bit, as we all were. But I remember watching Joel Embiid in his first practice, and he was going against Jahlil Okafor, who was a number 3 overall pick, who's still in the league, but again, didn't pan out to be a star as we anticipated. I saw him that first day. I looked at Brett Brown. I'm like, holy moly, this guy can go. This was not a gangly 7-footer. This was not a lumbering 7-footer. This was a freak athlete with ridiculous instincts and an incredibly competitive nose to be the best in the world. He got hurt shortly thereafter, but boy, oh boy, we saw enough in those first few weeks to be pretty confident that if this guy was healthy, he was going to be a transformational player. And the same thing with Simmons. I mean, you got a 6'10", 250-pound Mack truck who handles the ball. We had 2 unicorns. So at that point, life was good. I mean, the market was responding. They were kind of buying the future. That wasn't the issue. I was all in, confident, committed. And there were moments before that, though, that I looked at Sam, or Sam looked at me, or Brett Brown, our coach, and we're like, holy moly. And one of us would be going off the reservation. I remember after last game of one season, Brett Brown said something like, I'm tired of having all these gypsies, or something like that. He used some expression. I think he'd had like 45 players over the course of a year. And you typically would have 17 or 18 over the course of a year. And I went to him after the game because I oftentimes see him before his press conference and said, Brett, what are you doing? He's like, I'm sorry. I just frustrated. I lost my mind. I'm like, let's have those discussions in-house. In other words, not in front of the media. We all had moments. I had moments like that too, where I just thought, man, oh man, the grind, the pressure is too much. Is this ever going to end?
What kind of processes did you use internally for your own self? I mean, you can't control whether a player gets injured. You can't control the healing process, but you still have to be the CEO with untold numbers of responsibilities. So how do you, and gets to a lot of where your book goes, speak to that internal management to be grounded and to deal with, I'm 8,000 miles away, but I think the whole world has heard about Philly basketball for the last 5 years. And we haven't even got to the most recent number 1 pick that moved on from your team. You guys have been in the press like crazy.
Yes. My friend MICHAEL. Okay. Well, I can tell you this. We hired I think I've got 2,000 people that work in the organization now. There were about, a couple hundred when we showed up. There are only 12 people left that were here when we started. The gift of that is you get to bring people in who are signing up for the run we're about to be on. That's the gift, is you can find people who are resilient, who exude positive energy, and who want to run up the hill.
You inherited people that did not necessarily have that.
Well, they might have it a different way. In some cases, in change, this was a change environment. I had one at Madison Square Garden, I had one at the NBA, and I had one here. And so that's what I do. I'm not going to be the maintenance manager of the year ever. But from a change situation, you set expectations really quickly. And then you've got to make choices and decisions very quickly. And I might have made some wrong choices in moving people. And some people might have left that weren't the right choice for them. But generally, it wasn't an organization that could have made this run. That's, I think, the way it starts with, what do we want to accomplish together? And let's go find the people who want to do it. I will say, like, walking into your office, you would have never known that we were, over 3 years, the worst team in NBA history. You'd have never known. You walk in and people were happy. We were selling. Our business was actually getting better while our team was getting worse.
You had to have been playing a huge part of setting that tone. I mean, you're the CEO of all these people.
My let's go charge up the hill together. I have General Pat and rah-rah speech. I have that game. But at the end of the day, like, a CEO cannot do it by himself. I have extraordinary people I work with, extraordinary. From that end, Jake Reynolds comes to mind, who's now the president of the Devils. Chris Hex, another one, who's now the president of the Sixers. But these guys came in, and Jake, I think, was like 26 years old. He's hiring 100 salespeople to work for him. So you walk in, and there was just this positive energy. I once got a note from our landlord before we built our own training complex. We were being evicted, and I went to go see the landlord. I said, hey, what's the issue? We had a DJ on Fridays. We had a bell ring after sales. We had people had their own song, dance song, that if they sold something, they'd stand on their desk, their cube, and dance, and everybody clap along. I mean, it was a party. So we created an environment that, despite what was happening on the court, was an uplifting place to be. We talked about being first a lot. We sold the first jersey patch. We bought the first esports team. We were trying to build an identity when our team was winning 10 games a year. And we did. And we did that through tremendous talent and an unmatched culture that was inspiring to be. And for me, when you get a little older, I'm 51 years old. So when you get a little older, you figure out, like, okay, what am I doing this for? Why do I want to do what I do for a living? And for me, I want to develop the next great generation of leaders. And I want to make a difference in the world. I want to leave the world better than I found it. And this platform gave us all that. You know, the average age of my team is probably 27 years old. And I have folks that work for me that have worked for me in the past that are out running teams. And of my group now, it's the most talented group I've ever worked with. We've got, I don't know, maybe 15 people here, I think, that could run teams or run a big sports company at some point in their careers. That's unheard of in this business. And I'd love to sit here and take credit. You can set the tone, but it's next man up mentality. It's like, what's that next person doing to come in? That next person in is either making the culture better or taking you backwards.
I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so I had a chance to season ticket holder, father, Redskins. So I was there for all the Super Bowls for Jack Kent Cooke.
How about those teams? How fun were they?
Yeah. That was great. That was the best. I was at the bow game where he was bowing to see one owner, Jack Kent Cooke, and one coach at that time, Joe Gibbs, an unlimited salary cap. People like to say, well, Gibbs is great, but he had unlimited money, which is a little bit different than the world today. We've had an owner at the Redskins for the last, 20 years, and I disown the Redskins now. So from your perch, as you talk about all those great experiences and all the ways that you are designing the Sixers, and we're just talking the Sixers right now. I'm not an NHL guy, so I'll keep you on the Sixers to talk your lessons. But as you talk about all these different ways that you're designing a vision forward, contrast yourself, without naming names and without trying to get you to be too cocky or something, but contrast your vision and the way you take leadership with the Sixers to perhaps some NBA teams. Are there some NBA teams that are still run perhaps in directions where they could really be improved a lot?
We could be improved a lot. I would say that our story is really interesting, and a lot of people, friends of mine around the league, will talk to us about what we did and what we're doing and how we're doing it. But the NBA, the way we're run, and I've been in this league now for 20 some odd years, it is a partnership. We compete on the court. We'll fight to the death on the court. Off the court, we're all interested in helping each other drive revenue and build our brands. It's run 100% like a partnership. Are there teams that wish they were doing better? Of course. Are there teams that need to make some changes? Of course. Can I be doing some things better? Of course. But the way the league is run is we have a group that I used to run called TMBO, Team Marketing and Business Operations. That's that McKinsey group I mentioned earlier. We share best practices. Who's working in my market? I sit on several committees. The league, Amy Brooks runs the group now, very active in driving them. It's differently run than other leagues. I've been a part of other leagues. This one is run, it's a special league with a lot of peer pressure to try new things and be better.
Fans don't necessarily care for that explanation. Fans just want their team to win, right? Why don't you speak to the idea?
I don't remember patience. It's
Exactly.
Like, can you imagine if 30 teams won an NBA championship every year, it wouldn't matter.
Right. Speak to the idea of the way professional basketball players and the upper echelon of professional basketball players exist. Because the reality is there's only a handful of guys on the planet in any given time who can really, you can look to every year and say, my gosh, if we're behind that guy, we got a good chance to get to the finals or win. And I think sometimes fans might say, well, gosh, this team, they just don't win for a decade or whatnot. But the reality is there's only so many great players that can get you there. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's right. In the history of the league, at least since I've been here, the Lakers and Celtics are the two teams that have always been good. And when I came back into the league for a second time, the Celtics weren't good. And now they've been good for a really long time. And you look at the San Antonio Spurs, were really good for a long time. The Golden State Warriors were not very good, and now they've been very good for a long time. So I think it comes in waves. I mean, the system's set up with the draft and lottery system that it's meant to capture some of that.
But the San Antonio, they had Duncan and Robinson, two Hall of Fame guys. Maybe three if you add Ginobili and Parker. There's like four Hall of Fame guys.
Yeah, but part of it is like management matters in this league. So does leadership. There have been great players on other teams that haven't won. I mean, you can go through a slew of examples. Over time, excellent leadership, extraordinary management will keep you winning for some time. And a degree of luck. Like getting Tim Duncan is luck. That's great. That's wonderful. Congratulations. What are you going to build around them? There have been plenty of great players that haven't done anything in this league because the teams haven't been built around them, or the culture wasn't right, or it hasn't worked out for several different reasons. Again, you can look at organizations and say, like, okay, what are they doing differently and why? And how do we become one? I mean, that's the big test. And there are some teams that haven't been good for a long time. I think the Clippers are a great example. That was an organization that was not run very well for a long time. And you look at it now, and they're among the leaders in everything. How does that happen? That's Steve Ballmer. And it's not an accident. The guy was running Microsoft.
People that know about the NBA know about the prior owner of the NBA, of the Clippers, who left the league, and everyone knows what the Clippers did underneath him.
So I guess that's the most stark example. Most are more subtle than that. But I think that over time, and there are peaks and valleys in the evolution of a team, other than like a San Antonio that literally went on a 20-year run. Most teams go up and make their run for 6 or 7 years and then come down, then come back up, then come back down, then come back up, then come back down. But the teams that you see down for an extended period of time, that's where you, if you're a fan, will get really frustrated. And if you own the team or you're running the team, you need to look at what you're doing and how you're doing it for sure.
Who's given you the most authentic feedback since you've been in the position of CEO of these various teams? Who has given you the feedback, the number one piece, and even tell me what it was, but were you just kind of like, wow, that's authentic feedback? And perhaps you had some perspective you thought was great, but somebody nailed you and they said, no, here you go.
Yeah, my wife, Lisa, for sure. So I've been married for 25 years. I'll give you two quick examples. I was working for the Madison Square Garden. We were in a similar rebuilds with both the Knicks and Rangers that we went through at the Sixers. And I came home and I was on one. I was frustrated. We just lost by 20, 22 points or something like that to the Pacers. I was just mad. I came home. I probably slammed the door. I probably said some things I shouldn't have said. She walks me into the kitchen. Girls were asleep. I had young girls at the time. She's like, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean, what am I doing? She's like, what's going on? I was like, did you watch the game? She's like, yeah, of course I watched the game. And I said, did you see what happened? She's like, yeah. She's Scott, how good are your teams? I'm like, not very good. How many times are you going to lose? You got three teams, Knicks, Rangers, Liberty. I was like, I don't know, 100. She's saying, okay, 100 losses. So your plan now is one out of every 3 nights of the year, you're going to come home and be angry, be frustrated, be distant. And I was kind of taken aback. And she's like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. And it's not going to work for this house. I was like, whoa. So that would be one. I changed my behavior at that point. So I would use my ride home then to get my frustration out. And then when I walked in the door, I was clean. I've been clean ever since. Been myself when I walked in. I would be where my feet are when I walked in. And I wasn't doing that. So that was like a stark change. And the other one she does relatively regularly. And I wish I were better at this. If you walk into my office, you'll see there'll be tables in every conference room that say, put your cell phone here. We have meetings. You check your phone at the door effectively. And if I'm ever with my wife and I have my phone, she'll look at me and say, I'll wait, which is her way of saying, I think, hey, if something's more important, go ahead, take care of it. I'll be here when you're ready. And I think those are two examples to me that are real feedback. I understand them. They're delivered with love and assuming positive intent and for the right reasons. They smack me right in the face and bring me right back down to earth.
You've also talked about the work-life balance, and I tend to agree with your view here that, is there such a thing?
I don't think so. I think it's the biggest farce. Let's put it this way. I've never met a successful person who hasn't worked unreasonably hard, ever. I'm sure there's an example of somebody who got lucky, but I just think that the price of success is you're going to have to lean in and dig in and work hard. I also think that the line between work and home and work was blurred before COVID and is non-existent during it. And I believe in being present and not finding balance. I have a good friend who I often use, her name is Laura Hodgson O'Connor, and she always says, she uses the analogy of a seesaw and says, like, what fun would it be if everything were balanced? I always think, for me, it's not about what's fun. It's about how can I be most effective? And if I am in a meeting and I'm worried about my kids' parent-teacher conference that I'm missing, or if I am with my kids and I'm checking the scores on my phone, I'm doing something wrong. I think to be most effective, you got to be where your feet are. And to be where your feet are, you have to be wholly present in what you're doing. And if you're not, go do something else, because everybody knows. They know what you're doing. You know who that guy is in the meeting that's doing something else. Sometimes it's your boss and it's hard. You're on the phone with your boss, or you're on a Zoom with your boss. He's doing 3 other things other than pay attention to what you're saying. That doesn't feel great. But maybe he should just go do what he wants to do. I think we have to find that discipline. But the notion of balance to me is naive.
I told you at the top of the show, I'm in Vietnam. Vietnam is famous for their water buffalo. You've got a section in your book where you've got this water buffalo story. And I had to scratch my brain for a second. I was like, what is he talking about? I was like, the video. Why don't you tell this story? I think this would be a great way to bring people into where you've gone with your work.
When I got to Madison Square Garden, they'd just gone through some pretty high profile litigations. One was sexual harassment, one that's highly publicized, and the other one was not so publicized. It was a place that needed some change, and that's why I was there. On the first day, I brought everybody together. I played this incredible video from Kruger Park, which if you haven't seen, it's long and gory, so brace yourself. But effectively, it takes place at this watering hole, and there are these tourists filming this watering hole, and they're showing these water buffalo, about a whole herd of them, 300 or so water buffalo, come in from the outside. And then they pan over to the other side, and they say, wow, look at these lions. They're ready to pounce. So you see it all happen. You see it, it's right out of a National Geographic show. You see the water buffalo, you see the 5-lion attack, and they, of course, go after the smallest water buffalo. They tackle the water buffalo, and it trips into a watering hole. And they're trying to drag this water buffalo out on land so they could have a nice lunch. And just as they're about to get the water buffalo up, and it's a little baby water buffalo, the other buffalo had scattered. A crocodile, a giant croc, comes, snaps its leg, and it's tug of war with the baby. Finally, the lions pull away from the croc, and you hear the tourist say, the lions have won, the lions have won. Almost like he's watching a sporting event. And then the camera pans back, and you see this herd of water buffalo come back. Kind of hesitantly, the buffs in the front are a little hesitant because you're rolling on to lions. And then sure enough, they all together, shoulder to shoulder, come and use their horns and knock the lions and chase the lions away. The baby pops up miraculously, rolls back in with the herd. And my only slide of my first all staff meeting there was, who do you want to be? You want to be a tourist who watches things happen? Do you want to be a lion who attacks the small and attacks the weak? Do you want to be a croc who snaps at people when they're down? Or do you want to be a water buffalo? And I said, guess what, guys? You don't have to be a water buffalo, but you just won't work here. That became a symbol for who we are and how we act. There were water buffalo everywhere. Effectively, we bought buffalo nickels. And so if you did something to be an extraordinary teammate, you get a water buffalo nickel, and then we paste something on the wall. It became like wallpaper. It was a really, really, really good analogy for being an extraordinary teammate. And I think for me, the 3 things that make people successful in the world when you come into the work world, one is to work unreasonably hard. The other was to be an extraordinary teammate. And the other is to be intellectually curious. I think if you have those 3 things, the world is your oyster. But for us, that was a point in time that we had to figure out what it meant to be a teammate. And let me just give you a story on my first day there, which will tell you, now take you back. I got a call from a friend of mine. He said, Scott, how are you doing? I said, I'm great. He said, president of Madison Square Garden. Man, I would have never thought we went to high school together. I was like, yeah, it's sort of a dream job. Can you imagine? Kind of laughing. He said, my son's an intern there. And I said, no kidding. I said, have him call me. He's like, yeah, no. I don't really know my way around. It's my first day, but like, what do I do here? And I said, how's it going? He's like, well, I was like, well, what? He said, do you want to know the truth? I'm like, sure. It's my first day. I mean, why not? 2 days before, he was walking down the hallway and he said to one of the executives, hey, do you know where the copy room is? The guy yelled at him and said, do you know who I am? And that guy didn't make it either. I had a lot of turnover there too. But the point is that's not inspiring. And again, maybe it's the way I grew up. Maybe it's the way I worked my way up. Maybe it's just the way I was raised. But what a better world. What a better life if you walk into every situation assuming positive intent, making sure that you're open to new experiences and open to people and that you're treating each other with respect and dignity. And I use the word love at work, and I know it doesn't work for a lot of people. But for me, I always say, like, you don't have to like each other, but you have to love each other. You don't always like your brother or sister when you're growing up, but you always love them. That spirit has to be in the workplace to create an extraordinary team.
You mentioned working unreasonably hard, but this is, for some people listening to our conversation, they might think working unreasonably hard, that doesn't sound good. The reality is, though, if you're working unreasonably hard and you're not happy, you're at the wrong joint, right?
Yeah, that's right. There are some people, and God bless them, by the way, they can go work and work 9 to 5 and go home. I don't have that gene. I don't have it. But some people, when I say success, everybody has to find success and define success their own way. If finding success for you is moving to Hawaii and surfing every day and working at a restaurant at night, like, that's awesome. That's your path. I don't judge people for their decisions, but if you want to be in the corporate world, if you will, or you want to make a run, or you want to run a company, or you want to sell books, or you want to have an extraordinary podcast, you want to make a dent in the world, hey, guess what? Roll up the sleeves and let's go. There are no free lunches here. It just doesn't work. It doesn't exist. And I agree with you because I'm really, hopefully you can hear my voice. I'm passionate about extraordinary teams. I happen to be in the sports world, which is great. I don't think this pertains to sports. I think it pertains to the world and to life.
One of the phrases that I jotted down from your book that I really love, it's not necessarily revolutionary, but it's just phrased nicely, which is have a big vision, even if you're ahead of the market. When you have a big vision ahead of the market, it allows you to wake up every day energized.
Yes. Also, as you know, it's much higher risk out in front.
So what? Come on. You want to sharpen pencils for some guy making, come on. Come on. Who the hell cares? I mean, you've already taken more risks in your life than most people ever do. Come on. That's why you're at where you are.
I live it and I love it. You have to have a strong stomach because if you're choosing to lead from the front, that's where all the risk is. I get my Jones there.
You pass a threshold at some point in time where it no longer feels like risk compared to somebody else who's not in your shoes, who looks at it and says, oh my gosh, that's so risky. I've already just have to run to the bathroom.
You have to figure out, when you're running a company, it's easy. You can determine what your brand is going to be. And if your brand is going to be one that gets out in front, you understand where you're going, why you're going. Everybody's kind of playing that game. And others might choose not to do that. That's not a dip the toe in the water strategy. That's a, hey, let's go strategy. I think it's more fun. I think it's more exciting. I think you learn more that way. You certainly have to have an appetite for failure. I talked through my book about failing forward, which I truly believe in. I think it was FDR who said, rough seas make the best sailors. I believe that you've got to take risk, and I believe that you have to fail and fall. And that's where the big lessons are. You don't want to make the same mistakes twice, of course. But man, you think about all the great lessons you've learned in life. How many of them have been from a great success you've had? Not as many. I like it out front. I'm more comfortable out there. I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay making mistakes. I'm okay with a little heat, but I do like to reach and discover and breach. And I mean, that's what I love to do.
We talked about at the beginning that you guys have been a magnet for press. And of course, Philly sports writers are famous, always very opinionated, perhaps the most opinionated sports writers in America. But speak to right now, in talking about the Sixers, have you guys come full circle to win everybody over? Have people pretty much come around from those early stages and trust the process and guys being hurt? Have the fans come around to being like, wow, we really believe in this organization?
Yeah, we pass what I call the grandmother test. If your grandmother knows who Joel Embiid is, we pass. We pass that test for sure. I mean, it's easy to love a winner. I mean, again, for me, especially media-wise, like I do a lot less media-wise now. If we're winning 10 games, I need to be out front. If we're winning 60 games, someone else can do that better than I can.
Someone like me, I mean, I'm sure typical media is going to ask you typical nonsense questions. I want to just get that interesting chat going. Hey, I want to jump into something, the Constitution, in a moment, but I hinted at a player who ended up going number one, who did not work out for you guys in the last couple of years. I don't want to go into too many of the specifics. I think he's kind of rebirthed himself and got injured this year, but you guys had to exit from that situation. Is there a takeaway, a large lesson that you can learn from that situation? Or was it just a lot of random things that kept going unusually random that you couldn't control? What was your takeaway from that experience?
Taking a shot at a transformational player who's going to fit next to Ben Simmons was the right thought process. I'm not sure what went awry. We all have our own thoughts and opinions. I can tell you, we're talking about MICHAEL Coveel. He's a wonderful young man. There's nobody that I root for in the league more than him. I still text him on occasion. I root for him. I think he's going to be a really, really good player in the league. But man, I think the intention was right. Sometimes it's just not a right fit or wrong place, wrong time. The big question is, would you take that bet again? That wasn't my call, of course. It's our GM's call, but I'd ask him. I think that we're all interested in building a world-class team. You look at other world-class teams that have created dynasties, and you think, like, can you put this together? Is this the one piece that can put us over the top? And I think it's very analogous to life and to careers. And I think when we're young, we have this vision or version of what we think success looks like. That could be in relationships, that could be at work, or that could be in your community. However you define or look for success, we always think that's linear. We have this vision that, like, we can do this. It's just going to go. I'm smart. I work hard. I can do anything. I can achieve anything. And you go. And what you find out is, like, there's nothing linear about success. Nothing. And it's not like Hollywood. It just isn't. It's not like the Brady Bunch. It just doesn't work like that. And the reality is there are ups and downs, and there are pitfalls and mistakes. And hopefully there are incredible learning lessons that change the trajectory of your line and move the angle of your lineup. That's what I think it is about building a great team. Like, you're never done. You're never finished. The great dynasties we've seen in Chicago and San Antonio and LA and Boston, the core is the same, but you're moving the pieces around because you're always tinkering and tweaking to try to make these teams great. And I think that's like life. I don't regret many things in life or career or decisions around what we've done through the process. I wish we could have some of them back.
The reality is you make a decision. Okay, you made a decision. Guess what? You've got a chance to make another decision and another one and another one. And I think sometimes people get so caught up on the one decision, they don't realize they can keep making decisions.
That's a great insight. What I wish fans would understand is that you're making the best decision that you can make at that point with the information you have. And they're not always right. It's not a perfect science. We've been through 3 general managers, I guess 4. That's a lot in 8 years. That's more than most teams. So there's definitely a level of accountability for what you do and how you do it and who you draft and what team you build. There's also a lot of pressure, man. That is not a job I would aspire to ever.
You guys have got a rock and roll organization. One last thing about the book and your work, the notion of a constitution. And for me personally, I've never really done this exactly as you describe it, but speak to the idea of writing out your own constitution and what that means to you exactly and how somebody would go about it. What's your thinking behind that?
I have 4 siblings. 4 of us are running companies. Michael's runs a healthcare company called Get Well Network. So I was in his office and I saw behind his desk hanging on the wall was this leadership constitution. So I asked him I'm like, what is this? Because he, of course, was keeping me waiting. And he said, hey, you need to talk to Rich Hill, executive coach in Chicago, Rich Hill. I went to go see him and then ended up working with him with my team. And he believes that every person needs a leadership constitution. And what a leadership constitution is what are you declaring to be and what can you count on to be? So I'll read mine. I declare that I am a passionate and authentic leader of leaders who feels a gravitational pull towards talent and character. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I love people and being part of a team. I get energy from helping others and would give the shirt off my back to a stranger and anything, anytime to a friend. I am family first, high integrity, and surprisingly sensitive change agent who is confident, caring, and intellectually curious. This fuels a competitive drive that sometimes feels like a chip on my shoulder. You can count on me to bring positive energy into my space, exude urgency and push you, challenge you, nudge you, and raise the bar beyond your expectations and sometimes what you think is reasonable. Laugh with you, cry with you, love you, even when you won't laugh, haven't cried, and don't feel loved. Root for you today, every day, and always. Share the most personal thoughts, emotions, stories, highs and lows, because I'm okay with it and who I am. Enjoy the roller coaster of life, whether it be going forward, backwards, or upside down. Drive hard to reach the summit and then quickly start on another mountain. Share wins and take hits for losses. So effectively, hopefully what you heard there is, I declare that I am, and you can count on me to be. If you answer those 2 questions honestly, write down who you are, and then read that from time to time. Post it in a place where people know what you're declaring and what your constitution is. It gives you a sense of purpose in the morning to make sure that you're living who you are. And I found over time that when I'm feeling down or I'm feeling off or something's not right in my life, there's something in this constitution that I'm not living. It definitely is a grounding document. It's a temperature check document. It's aspirational. It's your best self, but it's not what you want to be. It's actually who you are. But it's a wonderful exercise that everybody should go through.
Why do you have a chip on your shoulder?
I guess if I were on a couch, they'd say, well, you're the second born, or I don't know. I never felt smart enough, or I never felt tall enough, or I never felt accomplished enough. I'm not sure. Maybe it's part of my DNA and who I am. I've always felt just like I've had to prove myself again and again. When that manifests itself as a big chip, it's bad. When it is a fire that fuels my energy, it's good. Managing that is something I'm very conscious of.
Very cool stuff, Scott. The book, Be Where Your Feet Are, 7 Principles to Keep You Present, Grounded, and Thriving. We only just barely touched on a lot of the great lessons and stories that you go through, but I wanted people to hear your personality, wanted them to get to know you a little bit. I mean, generally I find the way people like books these days, do they like Scott? Well, damn it, let me buy his book. That's kind of how it works. Something like that, you know?
Well, I hope so. Appreciate you and the work you're doing. Your podcast is amazing. I'll continue to listen. I wish you the best. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
Hey, Scott, where can we direct people? They can go to Amazon to buy the book. Is there any place you want them to check you out, or you can't answer 10,000 emails about being an intern with the Sixers?
I'm on Twitter at Scott O'Neill. You can find me on LinkedIn, but definitely check in Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or Bookshop. I'm a big fan of the indie bookstores. I do love Amazon and Barnes & Noble as well, but small business has been pummeled. So to the extent you can consider a small local bookstore and support local business, I'd appreciate that too.
Scott, thank you very much.
Michael, I appreciate you and best of luck. Continued success in all that matters.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.